Year-old man travels to Barbados to meet his online lover. The truth leaves him speechless. The cursor blinked on the screen like a heartbeat. Michael Cartwright had been staring at it for 3 minutes, his fingers hovering over the keyboard, paralyzed by the weight of what he was about to type. Outside his Boston apartment, the November rain streaked down the window in silver lines, distorting the city lights into watercolor smudges. He was 50 years old, divorced for 6 years, and had convinced himself that passion was something reserved for other people, younger people, people who still believed in fairy tales. But then, there was her, Amara. Her name alone felt like poetry in his mouth. He'd met her on a forum for Caribbean travel enthusiasts 3 months ago. She'd commented on his post about wanting to visit Bridgetown, correcting his pronunciation with a laughing emoji and a voice note that made his chest tighten. Her accent was melodic, lilting, each word wrapped in warmth. She spoke about Barbados like it was a living thing, the way the ocean sang at dawn, how the sun painted the sky in shades of mango and violet, the taste of flying fish that melted on your tongue. Their conversations had started innocently. Travel tips, cultural insights, shared photographs. But somewhere between discussing rum shops and hidden beaches, something shifted. The messages grew longer, more personal. She told him about her failed marriage, about raising her daughter alone, about the loneliness that carved itself into her bones during the quiet hours after midnight. He found himself confessing things he'd never told anyone, the way his ex-wife's laughter used to fill their home before it turned cold and distant, the terror of waking up alone at 50 and wondering if this was all there was. Amara listened. God, she listened. Her responses arrived in the dead of night, his morning, paragraphs of understanding, of validation, of a tenderness he'd forgotten existed. She sent him photos, her hands holding a conch shell, her silhouette against a sunset, her smile that seemed to hold secrets and promises in equal measure. He'd stare at those images for hours, memorizing the curve of her lips, the way her eyes crinkled at the corners. "I feel like I've known you my whole life," she'd written 2 weeks ago. Isn't that strange? It wasn't strange. It was terrifying. Because Michael felt it too, this gravitational pull toward someone he'd never touched, never smelled, never stood beside in the same room. Love wasn't supposed to work like this. Love was supposed to be earned through years of proximity, through shared struggles and accumulated memories. But this was something else. Obsession, maybe, or salvation. He typed, "I want to meet you." The response came faster than his racing heart. "Then come. Come to me, Michael. Let me show you my world." 3 weeks later, he was on a plane. The cabin smelled like recycled air and other people's anxiety. Michael pressed his forehead against the cool window as the aircraft climbed through layers of cloud, leaving Boston buried somewhere beneath the white. His stomach churned, not from turbulence, but from the crushing weight of his own recklessness. He'd told his daughter Emma he was taking a vacation, kept the details vague. She'd looked at him with concern, that particular expression that made him feel ancient and foolish. "Dad, are you okay?" she'd asked, her hand on his arm. "You've been acting different." Different. Yes, because for the first time in years, he felt alive, electric, terrified. He'd drained his savings account for this trip, the flight, the beachfront hotel, the elaborate plans Amara had suggested. She'd been so excited, sending him itineraries, restaurant recommendations, promises of moonlit walks along Carlisle Bay. "I can't wait to hold your hand," she'd messaged the night before. "To look into your eyes and know you're real." The words had made him weep in his empty apartment, ugly sobs that shook his entire body. When had he become this lonely? When had hunger for human connection turned him into this desperate creature willing to fly 2,000 miles to meet a woman whose last name he didn't know? The flight attendant's voice crackled through the intercom, announcing their descent into Grantley Adams International Airport. Michael's hands trembled as he gripped the armrest. Through the window, Barbados emerged from the Caribbean blue, a jewel of green and gold kissed by turquoise waters. It was more beautiful than the photographs, more beautiful than he'd imagined. Amara was waiting for him at arrivals. That's what she'd promised. But when he cleared customs and stepped into the crowded terminal, scanning faces with desperate intensity, she wasn't there. He checked his phone. No signal. He'd forgotten to set up international roaming. Panic fluttered in his chest like a trapped bird as he looked for Wi-Fi, for a payphone, for any connection to the outside world. Finally, the airport's free network loaded, and messages flooded in. "Michael, I'm so sorry. Emergency with my daughter. Please go to the hotel. I'll meet you there tonight. Room 347. The key will be waiting. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry." Disappointment tasted like copper. But he understood. She was a mother, after all. Responsibilities didn't pause for romance. He gathered his luggage and found a taxi, giving the driver the hotel address with a voice that sounded hollow even to his own ears. The Paradise Cove Resort sprawled along the western coast, painted in shades of coral and cream. Palm trees swayed in the breeze, their fronds whispering secrets to the wind. The lobby smelled like frangipani and money, that particular scent of luxury that made Michael acutely aware of how much this trip was costing him. The receptionist, a young woman with kind eyes, smiled as she handed him the keycard. "Miss Laurent left this for you, sir. She said to make yourself comfortable." Laurent. He finally had her last name, Amara Laurent. It sounded French, exotic, real. The keycard felt heavy in his palm as he rode the elevator to the third floor, his reflection in the mirrored walls showing a man who looked older than 50, tired, hopeful, foolish. Room 347 was beautiful. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the ocean, a king-sized bed with crisp white linens, a bottle of champagne chilling in an ice bucket with a note. "Soon, my love. Soon." Michael sat on the edge of the bed and waited. The sun set in violent beauty, painting the sky in bruised purples and burning oranges. Michael watched from the balcony, his phone clutched in his hand, checking for messages every 30 seconds. Nothing. He'd sent Amara 12 texts, called the local number she'd given him 6 times. Voicemail. 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 "You've reached Amara. Leave a message, and I'll get back to you when I can." Her voice was exactly as he remembered, warm molasses and island sunshine. He left 3 messages, each one progressively more desperate. "Hey, it's me. I'm here, at the hotel. Just call me when you can. Amara, I'm getting worried. Is everything okay with your daughter? Please. Please, just let me know you're all right." By midnight, worry had curdled into something darker. Fear. Anger. Humiliation. He'd flown 2,000 miles to sit alone in a hotel room, watching the ocean turn black under the starless sky. The champagne remained unopened. The bed remained empty. Michael remained alone. He didn't sleep. How could he? His mind spiraled through every possibility: accident, emergency, cold feet, deception. That last thought lodged in his brain like a splinter. Deception. Was this some elaborate scam? But she'd never asked him for money, never requested wire transfers or gift cards, or any of the red flags he'd read about in online dating horror stories. She'd simply wanted him. Or so he'd believed. At 3 a.m., delirious from exhaustion and anxiety, Michael opened his laptop and did what he should have done months ago. He reverse image searched her photos. The results loaded slowly, the hotel Wi-Fi struggling against his desperation. And then, there. The first hit. A Facebook profile from Miami. Different name. Elena Vasquez. Same face, same smile, same photographs of sunsets and beaches. He clicked through, his stomach dropping into free fall. Elena Vasquez had been tagged in photos from last week. In Miami. Not Barbados. Standing beside a man at a restaurant, their fingers intertwined, her lips pressed against his cheek. The caption, 5 years strong with my king. Forever isn't long enough. Michael's vision blurred. The room tilted. He searched further, finding more profiles, more names. Jessica Morrison in Toronto, using the same sunset silhouette photo. Claudia Reeves in London, using the conch shell image. Each profile connected to different men, different victims, different promises. He was not special. He was not chosen. He was not loved. He was a mark. The realization cracked something fundamental inside him. Michael stumbled to the bathroom and vomited champagne he hadn't drunk, bile and humiliation mixing in the porcelain bowl. His reflection in the mirror showed a stranger, red-rimmed eyes, hollow cheeks, the face of a man who'd gambled everything on a mirage. But the room key, the reservation, the note. Someone had arranged this. Someone was playing a game, and he didn't understand the rules. Morning came cruel and bright. Michael hadn't slept, hadn't moved from the bathroom floor, where he'd collapsed in the pre-dawn darkness. The sun through the window felt accusatory, exposing his foolishness in unforgiving light. His phone buzzed. Finally, "Michael, I'm downstairs. Please come to the restaurant. I can explain everything." His hands shook so violently he could barely type. "Who are you?" 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. "I'm Amara. Please. Just come down." He should have packed his bags, should have gone to the airport, should have reported whatever this was to hotel security, to the police, to someone with authority and answers. Instead, Michael found himself in the elevator, descending toward the ground floor like a man walking to his execution. Because even now, even knowing what he knew, some pathetic part of him hoped for an explanation that would make this okay. The restaurant overlooked the pool, tourists already claiming lounge chairs in the aggressive sunshine. He spotted her immediately, not because he recognized her, but because she was watching him with an intensity that made his skin crawl. She was not the woman in the photos. This woman was older, maybe 45, with sharp features and calculating eyes. Her hair was pulled back severely, her dress expensive but severe. She stood as he approached, and her smile was wrong, clinical, practiced, empty. "Michael," she said, and even her voice was different, flatter. "American, maybe Canadian. Thank you for meeting me. Who the hell are you?" His voice came out strangled, raw. "Sit down." "I'm not." "Sit down." The steel in her tone made him obey despite himself. She folded her hands on the table between them, studying him like a specimen under glass. "My name is Maya Laurent. Amara is my sister." The world lurched sideways. "Your sister was my sister." Her jaw clenched, and for the first time he saw real emotion flicker across her face. Grief, rage, something volcanic and barely contained. Amara died 8 months ago, murdered by a man she met online. A man named Christopher Hale, who flew from Manchester to meet his soulmate and strangled her when she tried to end things, because he was, in her words, pathetic and controlling and nothing like his photos. Michael's blood turned to ice water. He dumped her body in a cane field. It took them 3 weeks to find her. By then, the tropical heat had, Maya's voice cracked. She pressed her palms flat against the table, breathing deliberately. "Christopher Hale is in prison. Life sentence. And I got her laptop, her phone, her accounts. All those conversations with all those men, hundreds of them, all of them lies, all of them games. I don't understand. My sister was a con artist, Michael. A romance scammer. She bilked lonely men out of thousands of dollars with promises of love and futures that never existed. She destroyed marriages, drove men to bankruptcy, suicide, in one case. And when I found all that evidence, I realized something." Maya leaned forward, her eyes burning. She created this ecosystem of desperation and deception. She taught men that love could be purchased, that connection was a commodity. And one of those men killed her for it. Tears tracked down Michael's face without his permission. "Why am I here?" "Because you're one of the good ones." Maya's laugh was bitter, broken. "I've been monitoring her accounts, reading the messages. Some of these men are predators, married, abusive, looking for a warm body in a foreign country. But you were real. Your messages were so honest it made me sick. You actually believed her. She stopped, composing herself. "I wanted you to see what she was, what this fantasy costs. The hotel room? I paid for it. The reservation? Me. The photos? Stolen from real women she'd never met. I wanted you to come all this way and face the truth because maybe Maybe, if one person understands the devastation on both sides. Both sides? Michael's voice rose, attracting glances from nearby tables. You think we're equivalent? Your sister chose to lie, to manipulate, and you chose to believe a fantasy over reality. Maya's composure shattered. You chose to invest your heart in pixels on a screen rather than doing the work of real human connection. You chose comfort over vulnerability, escape over honesty. My sister was wrong. God, she was so wrong. But don't you dare pretend you're innocent. You enabled this. All of you lonely, desperate men throwing money and devotion at women you've never met, never vetted, never truly knew. You created the market she exploited. The silence between them vibrated with accusation and grief. Other diners had stopped eating, watching this explosion of raw emotion with horrified fascination. Michael felt exposed, flayed, every private shame illuminated under the Caribbean sun. She didn't deserve to die, he whispered. No, Maya agreed, her voice breaking. And you didn't deserve to be used. But here we are, both of us victims of the same disease, the lie that love can exist without risk, without reality, without standing in the same room and choosing each other despite every flaw and failure. She stood, pulling a manila envelope from her bag and dropping it on the table. That's everything. Her methods, her targets, her real story. Do with it what you want. Stay in Barbados. Enjoy the beach. Or go home. Either way, her eyes glistened. Either way, stop looking for love in reflections. They always lie. Maya walked away, her heels clicking against the tile, leaving Michael alone with the envelope and the ruins of his fantasy. He didn't open it immediately. Instead, Michael walked. Along the beach, through the sand that burned his feet through his shoes, past couples holding hands and families building sandcastles. The ocean roared its endless conversation with the shore, indifferent to human suffering. He thought about his daughter Emma, about the concern in her eyes when he'd told her about his vacation. She'd known. Somehow she'd known he was chasing something impossible. The envelope grew heavy in his hands. He found a shaded spot beneath a palm tree and finally opened it. Inside, printed messages between Amara and other men, transcripts of voice calls, her voice shifting between accents and personalities like trying on masks, bank statements showing wire transfers, thousands of dollars from desperate men around the world, and photographs. The real Amara Laurent. She'd been beautiful in a different way than the stolen photos suggested. Rounder face, genuine smile that reached her eyes. In one picture, she held a little girl, her daughter, maybe 4 years old, both of them laughing at something off camera. Michael stared at that photo for a long time, trying to reconcile the woman in the image with the architect of his humiliation. What had turned her into this? What desperation or damage or calculated cruelty had transformed a mother into a predator? And did it matter? Could understanding her motivations heal the wound she'd left in him? There was a letter, handwritten, tucked at the bottom of the envelope. Maya's handwriting was precise, controlled. Michael, I've done this 12 times now. Invited the men Amara targeted to Barbados to confront them with the truth. Some were angry. Some were relieved. One tried to kill me, blamed me for his losses. But you, I watched you in the lobby last night, saw you check your phone every few seconds, saw the hope drain from your face with each hour. You reminded me of someone. My sister and I were close once. Before she married a man who beat her, took everything, left her with nothing but debt and a child to raise. The scamming started as survival. $500 from a stranger to pay rent. $1,000 for medical bills. Then it became easier than working, more lucrative than dignity. She told herself these men deserved it. They were married, lying to their wives, hunting for affairs. She was just taking what they'd already decided to spend on betrayal. But you weren't like that. Your messages were innocent, hopeful. You talked about building something real, visiting her world, introducing her to your daughter. You made my sister uncomfortable because you didn't fit her narrative. You were the evidence that she wasn't Robin Hood stealing from the wicked. She was just a thief. I don't know if this helps. Probably it doesn't. But I needed you to know that she struggled with what she did to you. Her last messages in your conversation thread, the ones she never sent, said, "I should tell him the truth. He deserves the truth." But I can't bear to see the hope die in his words. She never sent those messages. And a week later, she met Christopher Hale, who killed her for the crime of being human instead of perfect. I'm not asking for forgiveness on her behalf. I'm asking you to remember that everyone in this story is broken, including you, especially you. Go home, Michael. Hold your daughter. Build real connections with real people who can disappoint you and love you and hurt you and heal you in the same breath. That's the only way forward. The only way out is through the truth. Maya. Michael folded the letter carefully, his hands steady for the first time in 24 hours. The sun had shifted, casting long shadows across the sand. In the distance, a child's laughter carried on the wind, pure, uncomplicated joy that seemed to belong to a different universe than the one he inhabited. He stayed in Barbados for 3 more days, not because he wanted to, but because changing his flight would have cost more than he had left in his account. He spent those days in careful observation, watching couples argue and reconcile at breakfast, seeing families navigate the small betrayals and reconciliations that made up real intimacy. He eavesdropped on conversations at the beach bar, heard people complain about their partners snoring, their annoying habits, the mundane frustrations of actual cohabitation, and he realized Maya was right. He'd fallen in love with a fantasy because fantasies never snored, never left dishes in the sink, never said the wrong thing at the wrong time. Amara, the fiction of her, had been perfect because she wasn't real. She was a mirror reflecting his own desires, his own narrative, his own desperate need to be chosen. The real woman behind the scam had been desperate too. Trapped by circumstances he couldn't fully understand, making terrible choices that cascaded into tragedy. She'd hurt him, yes, used him. But she'd also been murdered by another man who confused ownership with love, who believed his investment in the fantasy entitled him to control the reality. On his last night, Michael sat on his balcony and wrote an email to Maya Laurent. "I don't forgive your sister. I'm not there yet. Maybe I never will be. But I understand now that she was as much a victim of this system as the men she scammed, this marketplace of loneliness where we all pretend connection can be purchased instead of built. Thank you for the truth. It was brutal. Necessary. I'm going home tomorrow. I'm going to call my daughter and apologize for being distant. I'm going to join a community theater group because I used to love acting before life convinced me to be practical. I'm going to exist in physical spaces with real people who can see my wrinkles and hear my voice and judge me for who I actually am. I don't know if I'll ever trust again. But I know I can't keep living in screens and possibilities. The only love worth having is the kind that exists in the same room, breathing the same air, taking the same risks. I hope you find peace with your sister's memory. I hope Christopher Hale rots in prison. I hope we both learn to forgive ourselves for being human, flawed, desperate, hungry for connection in a world that makes it harder every day. Tell Amara's daughter, when she's old enough, that her mother loved her. Whatever else was true, that was real. I could hear it in the way Amara spoke about her. That love was the one honest thing in all our conversations. Michael. He pressed send and closed his laptop, watching the cursor blink one last time before the screen went dark. The flight home was different. Michael didn't stare out the window, didn't lose himself in fantasy. Instead, he talked to the woman sitting beside him, a grandmother named Patricia traveling to visit her new grandson. She showed him pictures, real ones on her actual phone, and complained about her son-in-law's terrible taste in baby names. It was mundane, ordinary, real, and it felt like healing. Emma picked him up from the airport, her face a mixture of relief and concern. "Dad, you look different?" he offered, echoing her words from weeks ago. Yeah, she studied him carefully. What happened in Barbados? Michael considered lying, keeping the shame private and buried. But Maya's letter echoed in his mind. The only way out is through the truth. So he told her. All of it. The online romance, the betrayal, the murdered woman, the sister's revenge education. Emma listened without interruption, her hand finding his and holding tight. When he finished, She was crying. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry you were that lonely. I'm sorry I didn't tell you," he whispered back. "I'm sorry I was looking for connection everywhere, except with the people who actually love me." They sat in the airport parking garage, holding hands, two people choosing reality over fantasy. Eventually, Emma started the car, and they drove home through the Boston streets, past coffee shops and bookstores and all the physical spaces where real human connection waited to be built. 6 months later, Michael stood on a small stage in a community theater, playing Willy Loman in Death of a Salesman. His hands shook during his first monologue, voice cracking on lines about dreams and failures and the desperate need to be noticed. But the audience was real, breathing, coughing, laughing at the right moments. And backstage, Emma waited with flowers, proud of her father for showing up in physical space, for being vulnerable in front of real people who could judge and accept him in equal measure. He never deleted the messages from Amara. He kept them as a reminder, not of betrayal, but of his own capacity for hope. Because that hope, misplaced as it was, proved he was still alive, still capable of connection, still willing to risk his heart despite every reason not to. The difference now was knowing that real love required more than hope. It required presence, patience, the willingness to see and be seen in all the unflattering morning light and difficult conversations and mundane moments that fantasy never included. Sometimes, late at night, he thought about Maya Laurent, wondered if she was still inviting victims to Barbados, still trying to teach lessons about reality and fantasy. He hoped she'd found peace, hoped she'd learned that education through trauma only created more victims. But mostly, he thought about that little girl in the photograph, Amara's daughter, now growing up without her mother. What story would she be told? Would she know about the scamming, the murder, the complex web of desperation that had ended in tragedy? Or would she be allowed the fantasy of a perfect mother, flawed only by circumstance and bad luck? Michael hoped for something in between. The truth, complicated and painful, but softened by grace. Because that's what they all needed. Perpetrators and victims and everyone caught in the spaces between. Not the harsh light of total exposure, and not the comfortable darkness of complete denial. The truth. Messy. Human. Real. On the 1-year anniversary of his Barbados trip, Michael received a package, no return address. Inside, a photograph of a woman and a little girl, maybe 5 years old now, standing on a beach. They were holding hands, laughing at something off camera. On the back, a message in Maya's precise handwriting. She asks about her mother. I tell her the truth, that Amara made mistakes but loved her more than life. That love and damage can exist in the same person, that we're all doing our best with the brokenness we've been given. Thank you for your email. For understanding that there are no simple villains in this story. Amara's daughter is named Grace. I thought you'd want to know. I've stopped inviting men to Barbados. You were the last one. Because I realized I was doing the same thing Amara did, manipulating people's emotions to serve my own narrative. Revenge disguised as education, cruelty disguised as justice. We're all trying to survive our pain by inflicting it on others. But maybe the real healing comes from choosing not to pass it on, from breaking the cycle instead of perpetuating it. I hope you've found your way to real connection. I hope the woman I saw in your words, Emma, your daughter, knows how lucky she is to have a father brave enough to be vulnerable. That's the rarest kind of courage. Thank you for showing me that truth can coexist with grace. I'm trying to practice that now. Some days are harder than others. Tell your story, Michael. Not to punish anyone, but to help other lonely people understand the difference between fantasy and reality, between connection and obsession, between love and hunger. The world needs witnesses who've been through the fire and chose not to burn others on their way out. With respect and hope, Maya and Grace. Michael set the photograph on his bookshelf, next to pictures of Emma, of his community theater cast, of the life he was building in physical space with real people. Amara's daughter, Grace, smiled out from that frozen moment, unaware of the complicated legacy she'd inherited. He thought about writing his story, about bearing witness to the intersection of loneliness, deception, and tragedy that had brought him to Barbados and back. But Not yet. First, he needed to live more life worth remembering. More moments of genuine connection. More proof that he'd learned the lessons Maya had carved into him with brutal compassion. The truth had left him speechless that morning in the Paradise Cove resort. But now, a year later, it had given him back his voice. Not to condemn or forgive, but to testify to the complicated reality that everyone in this story, Amara, Christopher, Maya, himself, was both victim and perpetrator. Damaged and damaging. Desperate for connection in a world that made it harder every day, the only way forward was through the truth. Messy, painful, liberating truth. And mercy for all of us stumbling through the darkness, reaching for hands that may or may not be there. Outside Michael's apartment, snow began to fall, Boston's first of the season. He watched it drift past his window, each flake unique and temporary, beautiful in its brief existence, before melting into the collective whole. Connection was like that, he realized. Individual moments of beauty that dissolved into something larger, something that couldn't be captured or possessed, only experienced. He picked up his phone and called Emma. "Hey, Dad," she answered, and he could hear the smile in her voice. "Hey, honey. I was just thinking, want to come over for dinner? I'll cook that terrible pasta you pretend to like." She laughed. "It's really bad, Dad. I know. But it's real. And we'll be in the same room. And that matters more than perfection." "Yeah," Emma said softly, "it really does. I'll be there in an hour." Michael hung up and started cooking, making peace with his own ordinary life. The pasta would be overcooked and underseasoned. The conversation would include awkward pauses and mundane details. Emma might check her phone too often and leave early. And it would all be real, imperfect, human, enough. In Barbados, the ocean still crashed against the shore where Amara Laurent had dreamed of escape and built castles made of lies. In Manchester, Christopher Hale sat in a prison cell, confronting the monster he'd become when he confused ownership with love. In a small house somewhere on the island, Maya Laurent held her niece's hand and told her stories about a mother who was complicated and flawed and fiercely loving. And in Boston, a 50-year-old man set the table for two, grateful for the daughter who existed in the same room, breathing the same air, building connection one imperfect meal at a time. The truth had left him speechless, but silence had taught him how to listen. And in the listening, he'd finally learned how to be present, how to be real, how to be enough. The end.